Seches Nedarim Daf Chaf Aleph begins the third parak of the Masechta. We begin the end of Daf Chaf, last three lines where we start the new parak, and this introduces the concept of Hataras Nedarim, taking a neder off, and it begins with four types of nedarim which you don't have to take off; they're automatically void. The Mishnah will introduce the four types and then tell us about one of them, give us examples. The Gemara will explain why it's void. The Gemara will ask if it applies to a different type of case, and then the Gemara will ask, do you have to ask to take it off, or is it automatically taken off? And the Gemara will attempt to resolve those last two questions. So we begin the Mishnah. The Mishnah says there are four types of nedarim that the Chachamim were matir. Simplest understanding is that you don't have to take off the neder; they are automatically void. The Gemara will bring a machlokes about that. But the four types of nedarim are nidrei ziruzin, that is, a neder you never actually meant to make the neder, you were just trying to emphasize and make an emphatic point, but you didn't really mean it. Nidrei havai is an exaggeration, where you over-exaggerated. Nidrei shkogos is a mistake. And nidrei onsin is where you're forced into it. Now the Mishnah explains nidrei ziruzin, and we'll get to the other three later on in the Masechta. So nidrei ziruzin, what do we mean when we say that you exaggerated? So the Gemara says that if you have two people who are trying to make a deal over a certain object, one is a seller, one is a buyer, and they were trying to decide on a price. One only wanted to pay 2 dinar, and the other one wanted him to pay 4 dinar. So the seller said, I vow that I'm not going to get any hana from any money less than 4 dinar that you give me, and therefore his point was, there's no point in you trying to argue for less because I won't accept it because I even made a vow against it. And the buyer said, I'm not going to use the object if I have to pay more than 2 dinar for it, and therefore he said, you may as well not try to argue me up because I can't even use it if I were to buy it. So the Mishnah's paskins is that they are allowed to both agree to sell it for 3. And the reason is because they both really want 3. They really wanted 3 all along. They didn't want to stick to 2 and 4. They were just trying to get the other guy to budge from his position a little bit. And that's why they made the neder. However, 3 they would have been happy with all along, and therefore they never really meant to make a neder asering themselves on 3. And the rule with nedarim is always you need not only to say it correctly, you also need to think correctly. You have to have in mind the right thing, you have to have in mind the neder that you're saying. In this case, they didn't have it in mind, and therefore it's voided. So the Gemara begins. The Gemara says, you said the 4 types of nedarim, chamim, or matir. So the Gemara wants to know, what is the reason that this neder is no good? What is the problem with the neder itself? So the Gemara first attempts to give a different explanation that we just gave. The Gemara says, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, name of Rabbi Tarfon, that a neder doesn't work unless you actually verbalize it 100% in a way that it is clear that it's going to be chal. Meaning, this opinion holds there's no such thing as a neder that's dependent on something else, where at the time you say it, it's not determinate whether it's going to actually take effect or not. It has to be 100% determinate. It can't be depending on something. Now, the case of Rabbi Tarfon is if you have a group of people walking and they see someone approaching them, and they argue over who it is. One guy says, "It's if that's not Ruvain, I'm a Nazir." And the other one says, if that is Ruvain, I'm a Nazir. So obviously one of them is a Nazir, who only one of the 2 possibilities are true. Yet, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Tarfon says, neither of them are a Nazir, because it was not determined, it was based on something that remained to be seen, and therefore it's not chal. So over here also, it was not determined whether he was actually going to pay that amount, and therefore the neder is not chal. So the Gemara says this is not the correct pshat. If this was the correct pshat, then the Gemara should say they can both agree to make a deal on 3 dinar. If they both decide they want to have 3 dinar, that's a deal that they could still make, because the neder wasn't chal because they didn't agree. That would be, the Mishnah should say shnehem ratzu. If they both decide that they want, then it should be b'shloisha dinar. It should be with 3 dinar. That's not what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says shnehem reitzin, that they both really want all along to sell for 3 dinar, and just not what they said because they were trying to make a point. Therefore, it's not the correct pshat. The correct pshat is as we said, that they really had in mind all along that it would be acceptable of 3 dinar. All right, now the Gemara is a shaila. The Gemara's shaila is, in our case, was where they were arguing over 2 or 4. The seller said 4, and the buyer said 2. Now, what if it was more than that for the seller and less than that for the buyer? What would you say in that case? Would you still say the same thing? Now, there's 2 explanations in the Ran as to what the shaila is. One is if the gap between them was wider, Would you still say that they each wanted to meet in the middle, or do you say no, now they were insistent? The other possibility is if they gave a very specific shear. If he said a dinar plus a pruta, and the other one said a pruta less than a dinar, case like that is very specific. Would you say that obviously they're insisting on that exact price, they're not just trying to bargain the other guy down? So that's the Gemara's shayla that the Gemara tries to explore now. So it says the Gemara, we have a proof from a case where two people were arguing. One of them wanted to invite the other one over for a big suda. He said, come to my house for a suda. The other one said, I vow I'm not going to step into your house, meaning I vow your house against stepping into it, and I vow a drop of water from me drinking it, meaning I'm not going to step into your house or drink a drop of water, vow. Now, the Gemara says the halach is he's allowed to go into his house and he's allowed to drink a drop of water because this is an exaggeration. He did not mean to answer that. He just meant to emphatically say, I'm not getting anywhere near a big suda from you. Now, the gap between their positions is very, very wide. One is talking about a drop of water or even just entering the house. The other one was talking about a big suda. Yet we still say that they didn't mean to stake out their positions. They just meant I'm not going as far as you. That's the Gemara's proof, and therefore the Gemara should say that in our case also, even if the spread between them was further, more than 4, less than 2, you would still say that that is a not a firm position, and they can meet somewhere in the middle. So says the Gemara, it's not correct. Over here, it's unlikely that it's because they wanted to meet in the middle. Over here, the pshat is, the reason why I said a drop of water is because he said I better vow off a drop of water from this guy because tzaddikim do a lot and they say a little. So he's going to end up just saying, okay, just come in for a drop of water, and then he's going to end up feeding me a whole suda. So therefore I have to make sure that I even vow off a drop of water. That's what he used that expression. But as far as whether he really meant it or wanted to be in the middle, that's not, you can't determine that from here. And therefore, for our situation, we have a suffix. What he meant, we still don't know what he meant. The Gemara resolves, Tibai, the question remains unanswered. You're right, we don't have a solution. Alright, now the Gemara goes on to, do you have to ask for a heter to these nedarim, or is it automatic that there is no chalais to these nedarim at all? These 4, we're now referring to all 4 in the Mishnah. So the Gemara has 2 versions of the following Gemara. One is that we're addressing that question, and one is that was not an issue at all. According to the first version, Rav Yehuda says in Imra Rav Asi, you do have to ask a chacham for a resolution to all of these. According to some Rishonim, there's a girsa here that it's only if one is an Am Aretz, but a Talmid Chacham doesn't have to ask. So the Gemara says that they said that Rav Yehuda quoted Rav Asi, and then he says, and then I went to Shmuel, and Shmuel said you have to ask for a chacham. The Mishnah says the Mishnah says the chachamim were matter. It's automatically mutter. Why should you have to ask the chachamim? Why should you have to ask a chacham to find you an opening to resolve this? Any of these 4, they're all void automatically. Now the Gemara is the second version of this Gemara. This is what by Rav Yosef, and he says Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav Asi, a chacham uses these 4 as the guide to what type of neder he should be matir. In all these 4, there was a clear misunderstanding at the time of the neder. When the person who's making the neder said it, he did not mean that the neder should stick. He meant something else. Somehow the neder was made under false understandings or false circumstances. That is called a pesach. And there's an opening where you can say that had you fully understood the circumstances, you never would have made the neder. The neder was made under false pretenses. You never meant to make this neder, and therefore the das lindor is not there. That's where you should be making a pesach. That's where you should be making a heter, where you have a pesach, and you could say he never meant to make the neder. He never really had the das. He didn't understand the circumstance correctly. However, if you want to just make a heter for a neder based on charata, where the person regrets that he made the neder, it's important here, not that he regrets that he still stuck with the neder, that he regrets in the first place that he made it. That is not a valid reason to take a neder off, because that does not show he didn't have das. He had das at the time, and he knew he was going to regret it, and he made it anyway. He just now regrets that that's what he did. That is not a reason to take a neder off. That is what Rav Asi is saying here. Now, that would be nothing to do with the question of do these nedarim need to be asked, but you learn from these 4, which we agree are automatically void, how you void a neder. Now, what this means is that, according to this version of the Gemara, in order to be matir neder, you need to have a pesach. It's not enough to have charata. The Gemara now brings 2 other opinions. One is the opposite extreme, that charata works, Gemara says that's the opinion of Rav Huna. Gemara quotes an incident that happened with Rav Huna. Somebody came to him and asked to be matir neder, and Rav Huna said, "Were you in the same frame of mind now as you were then?" And he said, "No. No, then I was in a certain frame of mind, now I'm in a different frame of mind. Had I been in that frame of mind, I never would have made the neder in the first place. Therefore, my current frame of mind, I regret it." And he said, mutter lach. So therefore, all you have to do is regret that you ever made it in the first place, and that's enough. That's Rav Huna's opinion. Now, Rabbi Bar Rav Huna has a middle level. He says it's not enough to just say that I changed my mood. I never would have made the neder had I been in the current frame of mind. But you don't have to go so far as to have an actual circumstance that's different. We could have a theoretical circumstance. If something theoretically would have happened, then you would never have made the neder, that's enough. So he said, if 10 people would have come to you and tried to appease you and convince you at the time you made the neder not to make it, would you have made the neder? And so somebody came to him and he said, this is what he asked him. And he said, if I would have had 10 people that came to argue with me, I would never have made the neder. Now, 10 people did not actually come to argue with him. It hasn't happened then, and it didn't happen now. So there is no Pesach here. All there is a form of regret, but it's regret based on something which could have happened that didn't. That, according to Rabbi Rav Huna, is enough, and the Gemara therefore accepts that. Now the Gemara shows that this is actually Machlokes Tanaim. The Gemara says that we have a brisa where Yehuda says, we say to the person, are you in the same frame of mind then as you are now? And if he says no, then you're matir the neder. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi says, for in the name of his father, you say, if there were 10 people who would come and appease you, would you say the neder? And if he says no, then you're matir the neder, no problem. All right, now the Gemara brings a number of stories, incidents that happened where people were matir the neder. We learn from this how neder should be matir. So Gemara says that somebody came in front of Rabbi Asi, not the same as Rav Asi we quoted earlier, Rabbi Asi. Rabbi Asi asked him, do you regret the neder? Are you in pain that you made the neder? He said yes, so he permitted it just based on that. Somebody else came to Rabbi Elazar, second story. He said, did you want to make the neder? He said, if they would not have made me angry, I never would have made the neder. He said, okay, so then it should be as you wished. That's enough to be matir the neder. Third story, there was a lady who came. She had made a neder aser and kana on her daughter. So she came in front of Yechadan, and he said, if you would have known that your neighbors would say that this daughter must have done something immoral, otherwise her mother never would have made a neder. If you would have understood that this is what would happen from the neder, would you have made it? She said no. This is a classic Pesach, and based on that, he was matir the neder.